Okay, and good evening. Again, welcome to this week's edition of the JA Company Program Speaker Series. A couple of housekeeping reminders as we get started. First of all, we will be recording tonight, so I know that many of you have been sharing this opportunity with other members of your company program team, and then of course our coordinators as well. So Stuart will post it this week, and we encourage everyone to share this within your companies. Secondly, we'll take about 20 minutes to talk to Mr. Sperling this evening, and at the end, we will open it up for Q&A. And at that time, go ahead and raise your hand, switch your video on, take it off mute. But in the meantime, please turn off your camera and have your microphone on mute. I will, before I forget, remind everyone that next Monday is actually a holiday, so we will not be having our conversation next Monday night. But in 2 weeks, we will be having Nick Beyer from Saxby's, CEO and founder of Saxby's, will be our guest that evening, and we will send out some reminders information for that week as well. So with that, I'm going to welcome Scott. Scott comes to us from Kalypso, and Scott's going to tell us first a little bit about himself and then find out a little bit more about what his company does. Scott, welcome.
Thanks, Paul. Hi, my name is Scott Sperling. I am a fellow at Kalypso, which is now a wholly owned subsidiary of Rockwell Automation. We're a consulting firm, and my role there is to lead the data science and artificial intelligence practice and apply that and apply AI and ML, machine learning, to solve business problems. I oversee our technical teams and also participate in project work.
So Scott, as I can imagine, you didn't graduate from high school and say, I want to go to AI and ML as my future career. So tell us a little bit about that path. Where'd you go to school, and what were some of the stops along the way before you got to where you are now?
So a very circuitous route to data science, but I went to school. I graduated from George Mason University with degrees in philosophy and economics, and I went on to graduate school at George Mason University and studied economics there. And then I became a professional economist. I worked in that field for a little over 10 years, or right around 10 years, and then I expanded into applying those tools that I learned in economics into the broader concept and broader topics of artificial intelligence and machine learning.
So now when you say professional economist, of course, to me, that sounds like a made up job. So tell me a little bit about what that means and what was a day in the life of a professional economist?
All right. So when I first started my career, I did a lot of work around just applying economic concepts to specific businesses. And that evolved into forecasting the economies of different states in the United States or different countries. And then I began to focus and specialize in certain industries. So I would create economic forecasts for or apply economic thinking to sort of the insurance industry or to the retail industry, and how does the retail sector look like it's going to perform over the next year? What are some of the risks to that sector? And then focused even more later in my economics career on the travel and tourism industries, where applying economic principles to concepts around what would happen if, for example, there were an oil spill. And how would that affect travel and tourism, and what were the economic drivers of allowing that recovery to happen, or how would it detrimentally affect the economy moving forward?
So a lot of contingency planning. So give us an example of who your normal clients would be. Like how do they decide that they need your services?
Today, within my current role, those clients could be Fortune 500 companies, and generally, we focus today on digital innovation and how does how does the evolving software landscape, how can we create you may have seen commercials like for C3 AI or the older GE Digital commercials, even IBM Watson, where they're talking about digital twins or the digital thread. And so for us, it's connecting the enterprise through digital technology all the way from product creation and product ideation all the way through the life cycle of that product from creation to manufacturing to the sale and service of that asset or product.
And how, so I would imagine that meant at one point a lot of site visits to customers. So in the wake of COVID over the last 10 months, how has that changed?
So I have been in my house for the last 10 to 11 months. Yes. That has changed dramatically. I used to travel quite a bit. I was usually gone in a normal week from Monday through Thursday or Friday, and visiting my clients. Today, I do that through this venue, exactly like we're doing tonight. There are a lot of video conferences, a lot of phone calls, close interaction through electronic communication.
So with that, tell us a little bit about how do you build trust and rapport with those customers? One of the things that, the students in our program, they've kind of gone through that process you've described, right? From product ideation to just figuring out what their marketing plan is going to be, to how to then get the raw materials or services from their vendors, to then taking that out to their customers. But most, if not all, of that's had to have been done virtually. So tell us a little bit from your end. How do you make sure your customers know that they can trust you and you will do a good job?
It's a daily task to do that, and a task in the good sense, right? It's before in person, you can build a certain rapport with people. The handshake obviously was one of those things, which is now gone. It's now the elbow bumps, which we were using back in early March of last year before we were told to stay home. And today it's when you're meeting with a new client or beginning a new project with a client, it is trying to be as close to face as possible, like we are tonight, and keeping that point of contact very close and very constant. And then it's also about being able to display that you are doing what you've said you would do, right? So it's delivering on your promises.
Okay. So in almost any business, as hard as you try to deliver on those promises, something goes south, right? Something goes wrong. So tell us a little bit about, generically, I mean, you can give a specific example, but when something does go wrong, what's the process you go through as the manager and a leader of a team to try to get back in the right direction?
Yeah. So the first thing I would say is, if that happens, I probably haven't done my job correctly. Because first of all, part of my role with my team is to be able to, I wouldn't say predict, but predict and mitigate risk before it happens, right? But if something does go wrong, then the first thing is assess the situation, right? Where are we? What did we say that we would do? And why is the work product that we have created thus far not aligned with that outcome? And then if it is truly something that is that a problem, like an unforeseen risk, something arises that was totally not thought of before it occurred, how do you make a new plan to deal with that? It's just like the planning that you made before. I can't remember if it was Patton or Eisenhower who said it was something to the effect of, like plans never work out, but the most important thing is planning. Something to that effect, right? So it's making a new plan, and again, assessing those risks before you put it into play, working with your team in order to in order to walk through those situations, those scenarios that may pop up as future risks as well before you go and execute on that new plan.
No, I would imagine a lot of that depends on you having a good relationship with your internal team, right? So how do you make sure you maintain that relationship, and how do you make sure that their voices are heard, to try to make sure you're providing that promise you made to your customer?
Yeah, so we have many layers within our firm. And that's one of the things I find that Kalypso is very good at, is providing that culture of candor. So we have, that is one of our stated things that make us Kalypso. The things that make us unique is this notion of a culture of candor. So that is, at any point, at any time, you can speak your mind. Doesn't mean you can say anything you want, but it does mean that you're truthful, that you're honest, and that you go to those situations with mutual respect. So that's one way. The second way is we have a mentorship model, or counselor-counselee relationship, where I am paired up with many of our more senior data scientists as their counselor. And so we have that relationship with each other, that my goal is to build them into the next me, so that they can advance to the position that I have now. And so I work with them on a daily basis, and most of those people are on my teams. So that's another way that we layer in that ability. And then, finally, it's I have an open door policy with everybody on my team. So even if it's not we have somewhat daily team meetings now, just to make sure that we're all moving toward the same goal and we're all aligned on those goals. But I have an open door policy. Anybody on my team can come to me at any time in order to candidly provide any feedback, and ask for any help that they need at any point in time.
Now, you mentioned mentoring, and it sounds like you have a good, formalized process within the company. But I would imagine throughout the course of your career, you've probably had, informal mentors. Did you seek those mentors out, or did they find you?
I had to seek them out. And so I would say, if I go back into, I've had weird mentor-mentee relationships before, right? At one point, one of my mentors was actually younger than I was. He was, I had started an internet, like a website building business, right? And so building those websites, like a long time ago, like back before the .com bubble burst, he was basically taught me everything that I knew about full stack development, right? I was not a developer at the time. I barely even knew how to operate the computer that I had. And then all of a sudden I learned how to be a systems administrator, a web developer, a programmer, database analyst, all of those things all at once. And he was an immense help to me. And through my academic career, I reached out to one of my professors whom I had a lot of respect for. And I still talk to him to this day. Not as frequently as we used to, but we still get back and forth with each other. And then professionally, in the firm that I was in previously to Kalypso, we had the notion of a mentorship program there as well. And so I still keep in touch with a couple of my mentors that I've had over the years there. In fact, I talked to one last week. And that relationship is really a give and give more relationship, right? Nobody's going to give you their time unless you give the effort to make their time worthwhile.
No, absolutely, and I agree. It's so, as with so many, both personal and professional relationships, you have to give as much as you're willing to get. and Scott, I think you brought up an interesting point there that we don't often think about. We think as mentors as always being older, right? And more experienced, and experience comes in many ways. And with the relationship you had, your mentor was somebody who had a skill set that you didn't have, and was willing to share that skill set with you, to help further your career. And I think that's a good lesson for all of us to think about is, we can learn from all directions, not just people who are maybe more seasoned than we are. And I think that's something, that as I think about it, when I work with students in our programs, I'm learning things from them every year that maybe I had not thought of before. So, kind of, Scott, I'm going to go back to the point I made at the beginning, relative to, when you were in high school and not thinking of, I want to go into artificial intelligence. So tell us a little bit about, from your opinion, what are the skills that make you successful? Because I think that's important for a young person that's thinking about the world of work, right? Because, when you were in high school, when I was in high school, in a lot of cases, in a lot of ways, what you're doing now didn't even exist, right? So
Right.
as we fast forward, what are the skills that you think are most important that a young person's going to need to have to be successful no matter what they do?
Yeah, that's a great question. So I'll remember back to high school. When I was 16, I took my first job, right? So I learned how to work for somebody else, right? And the value in making, let's call them making promises and keeping those promises, right? Agreeing to deliver on a certain aspect, in exchange for getting paid. So there's a relationship there. So keeping that relationship open and honest. And I would say the skill set there at that time was just working hard, right? There were certain things that you needed to do and you got them done. And no matter what, like going from food service to customer service and those sorts of jobs, being able to interact with the public, learning how to develop personal relationships and doing that quickly, and then recognizing that there are people out there that are willing to teach you, right? So as long as you're willing, it goes back to that mentorship question, right? As long as you're willing to learn, people are willing to teach you.
No, I think that's a great point, and I hear that from leaders all the time is, what makes them successful? Well, first of all, it's usually pretty basic stuff, right? It's showing up. You talked about that.
Mm-hmm.
It's getting that first job. It's showing up. It's doing what your employer expects you or asks you to do. It's always being willing to learn. I think all good leaders will tell you that they are constantly learning. And if you follow certain leaders on social media at all, the Bill Gates, the Warren Buffetts, the Mark Cubans. Mark Cuban's actually a junior achievement alum, and I was just listening to some comments he made today about his experience in junior achievement, and he talked about even now how to be a good leader, you have to be willing to continue to always learn. But part of that learning, and Scott, you touched on this, is the ability to listen, right? And to listen to those who may be able to teach you something, but may also be able to share something you had not thought of. So Scott, from that perspective, if we were to go back and talk to you in high school, what would be the one thing that you wish someone had told you then that you know now?
Be persistent.
Okay. Why is that important?
It is easy to sit back and let things happen. Mm-hmm. And it's also easy to sit back and accept what's given to you or what's put in front of you. And so I'm going to amend my answer. It's be proactive and be persistent.
Okay.
And that is put your ideas forward in the best way that you can and continue to advocate for yourself in those ideas.
No, and I think that can be so important, right? Because you want to be the person making the choices. You don't want to have the choices made for you. And so that being proactive, things you said tonight, having a plan, being persistent, that puts you in a situation where you are in charge of your career, you are in charge of your education, you are in charge of your success, and how all of those things can be so important. So.
Mm-hmm. And I would add to that. You were saying it before, and George Young, our now our general manager, but our lead partner before we were acquired, when COVID hit, the first thing he said to us is, do what you need to do, but once you're ready, show up. Mm-hmm. And showing up is super important.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
And then one of our other, I was talking about the culture of candor earlier, but one of our other 7 things that make us Kalypso is a passion for lifelong learning. And as you were saying earlier, part of my homework tonight is learning about A-star pathfinding for simulation. I'm not a simulation expert, but by next week I will at least know something about simulation and pathfinding in artificial intelligence. So it continues.
Well, and I would imagine there, Scott, in your role, you're not expected to know everything, right? But you at least have to know enough to ask the right questions, and then let the people who do know everything take it from there. Is that a fair approach?
I think that's fair, and it's also knowing enough to be able to keep that communication with our clients, so that and to keep that level of trust with the clients, so that they understand that I at least seem like I know what I'm talking about, and that they are getting the value for which they are paying and they expect to receive. And so without me putting in that effort to not only be able to communicate what the team is doing to the client, but to be able to communicate between what the client needs and what the team should be doing, I need to understand both sides of that equation.
I would imagine, though, then that requires a tremendous amount of trust of your team, right? Because just in your role, there are going to be things that they know that you don't, and that's okay. That's why they are there. And so you have to trust them, but then they also have to be confident enough in their position to make those decisions that are going to move that project forward.
Oh, absolutely. And being able to instill what I expect from myself into that trust relationship with them, and having them understand that I trust them as much as I want them to trust me, allows us to move together as a team.
Excellent. Well, hey, I'll give everybody a quick reminder. We're going to open it up for questions now. So if you have a question, go ahead and raise your hand in the chat, and then I will call on you. Oh, we got 2 hands that are raised here. Hold on. Okay. So, Ayad, I'll go with you first.
Yeah, thank you.
Hey, congratulations, by the way. I saw you on LinkedIn moving into a new internship.
Oh.
So I am reading those, so congrats on that.
Thank you. Yeah, I actually started like the end of December, but I didn't update it until now.
Oh, okay. And I don't always read my LinkedIn as much as I should. So you could have told me it had been there since December, and I probably would have noticed till today. But go ahead, ask your question.
Yeah, first I just wanted to thank you for coming. It was really informative, and I learned a lot about like persistence and like mentorship and all that. So my one question, I guess, would be like more about personal relationships. So like you talked about like the best way to give and like how to like sort of like kind of, I guess, sorry, I lost my train of thought for a second, but like kind of like giving them what like the other person wants in a way. And so I was just like wondering, like, how do you like understand what they want in the first place?
Yeah, so I think the point that I was trying to get across there is that in that mentorship relationship, your mentor is going to give you as much time and effort. They'll put in a commensurate time or commensurate amount of effort as you're willing to give, in the sense that I have a certain skill set that I'm willing to share with my mentees, my counselees, and I will, freely provide that information, give them advice on, what to do next, or some areas that they could focus on and improve on. And unless they take that action, there's no reason for me to give that direction again. Well, there could be, but if they're not willing to take that, it's less of an incentive for me to continue to develop that relationship, because it's as much a relationship for the mentor as it is for the mentee.
And so I guess like a follow-up question to that would be like when you're first like starting out the relationship, like what's kind of the best approach to like asking? Is it like a direct like do you want to like help me with build my career, or is it like?
Yeah, so I think you should have a reason. So if you're seeking out a mentor, you should have a reason for wanting to go to that person to begin with, right? And so you should know as much as reasonably as you can, like without being creepy, right? Know who they are, what they do, if it's within a place where like you're interning and you're trying to work with somebody at the place where you're interning, you'll know what division they're in, or what their function, their role is. You can then go to them and depending on what you want to do, or what kind of advice you would want from them, just approach them and let them know, like, this is what I'm looking for. This is what I'm willing to do. Would you be willing to help me with that? If I remember correctly, this is probably something that I did moving. I used to be with a really small firm, and then as I moved to a big firm and trying to navigate that whole entire 40,000 person company, going from a 6-person company to a 40,000 person company, you need to understand, how to navigate your career through that new organization. I actually went to Google, my friend, and Googled, mentorship and how to work with a mentor. There are a couple of pretty good resources out there, if I remember correctly, that I found at the time. So that's one piece of advice.
All right, cool. Thank you so much.
You're welcome.
And Scott, I think a key piece that applies to so much in life, right, is first you got to ask. So many things in our business relationships start with the ask, and being willing to ask the question, to make the connection, to pick up the phone, and I would say, and it sounds like you would agree, that that mentoring relationship is the same way. You've got to be the person who's proactive and say, hey, in some future state, would you meet me for a cup of coffee? Could you answer this question? I'd like to find out more about this, and then see where it goes from there. So we've got one other question. Nahid, go ahead.
Yep, you got it. Just had a quick question. So you mentioned you were also doing philosophy when you were majoring in economics. How much would you say that helped you out? Because that was actually something I've also been considering as like a double major. I'm also planning on going into economics.
Yeah. So I think I started with philosophy because I didn't really know what I wanted to do, and moved into economics. It helps you in logical thinking. There's some very interesting areas of philosophy as well. And I actually used that and applied it to economics, where part of my degree was in the history of economic thought. So how does knowledge build over time?
And just one more follow-up. What advice would you give for, I guess, students in high school that are planning on pursuing a major in economics? Any specific experience that we should get, look into things, etc.?
I would say anything, as with building a career, your academic career is going to be very similar. Take advantage of your professor's office hours. Take advantage of teaching assistants. Stay on top of the work that you need to do. Put in the effort, and as long as you're communicating with your professors, I think that's probably the easiest way to be successful in college, right? So it's just like that mentorship role. Like I said earlier, one of the mentors that I still communicate with was one of my professors in graduate school.
Okay, thank you so much.
You're welcome.
Yeah, Scott, I think that's sometimes something that's lost, right? Is using, your professor is not just the person who is regurgitating that information to you, particularly in college. And so many students that I talk to will refer back to the relationship that they had with professors that will refer them to that internship, will help them with that interview, will open that door, post college, heading to graduate school. There's actually some data to back it up that Gallup has done some work on earning potential and success after college. And one of the indicators of success is students who actually felt like they had positive relationships with professors while they were in school. So definitely, I think a nugget there that as you all, all of our students kind of move into, the next step in college, think about, how you can use those professors as a resource also. So, well, with that, we are actually out of time. Scott, this was great. Thank you so much for joining us. When we started this, one of the reasons we did it is because one of the advantages of being in our traditional JA company program with the network the students were able to build with their professional mentors, and now doing everything virtually, we wanted to, in some ways, try to replicate that. So we always encourage our students to reach out to our speakers through LinkedIn. Hopefully you'll be able to respond to some of those as appropriate. And then, they'll take what they learned this evening and hopefully share that with other students in their group. So one more reminder that we will not be here next week. We will be back in 2 weeks with Nick Byer from Saxby's. But let's thank Scott one more time for spending his evening with us. And with that, everybody have a great night, and we'll see you after the break. Take care, everyone.
Thank you. Have a good day.
Thank you.